This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, it is common to see rivals meet each other on the field in the Superdome, but this week, a conservative Republican governor-elect and a liberal Democrat New Orleans district attorney said they would be on the same team, at least on matters of fighting crime. Democrats also have internal issues to face after a statewide drubbing in the recent elections. We'll look at the party's condition, and we will discuss Jefferson Parish, one of the state's most Republican areas, and the ways that its population is changing. Our Future Watch segment examines the local hotel industry and what the immediate future looks like. And we will speculate on the future of some rising star politicians who emerged from the recent elections. Meeting on our field are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources; Drew Broach, journalist for the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate; Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter; and Jeremy Alford, editor and publisher, La Politics Weekly and The Tracker. And we go to Errol first, because we did see a joining of two politicos who we really didn't quite anticipate seeing on the same field.
Not exactly. You know, during the campaign, Jeff Landry was interviewed by Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson asked Landry about his criticisms about New Orleans. He's got to do something about New Orleans. How are you going to fix it? And Landry said, "I'm going to bend it to my will." This is not a statement of a shy person at all, okay? I mean, no. You know, going there, well, we saw what might be the first example of it, and on the face, it's very impressive, okay? Because he had a big press conference at the Superdome and made several appointments, but the most notable was talking about, he had Jason Williams, the district attorney, so-called new breed of progressive. I don't know where they got that term to people who are just ultra liberal or something like that, okay? District attorneys. And he had Liz Muriel, who's the new Attorney General-elect, and of course Jeff Landry himself. And what they talk about is combining and getting ways that they can get the state more involved with fighting crime in New Orleans. And most notable was a plan which they've agreed to is anytime there's any kind of legal action that involves the state police, if they arrest someone, then it'll be the Attorney General's office. They'll take care of it. And Landry pledged to bring more police into New Orleans. He announced a new police chief, a guy by the name of Robert Hodges, who's like a 28-year veteran of the state police, but he's from New Orleans. He went to Brother Martin,
right.
So he knows the turf at least. So it did seem to be a first effort toward doing things, and he's committed about that because he always talks about Savannah and Charleston and New Orleans just has this blight that's just, and he always blamed it on the Democrats in New Orleans. And there he is standing next to a Democrat with Jason Williams. And Williams didn't disagree. And he praised the governor for having, the governor-elect for having the insight and to understand the financial importance and everything else. And so we'll see what happens. Ironically, you know, one thing that the so-called progressives were against were having youth offenders tried as adults. And just this past week, they'd finished the trials for that awful carjacking, in which the three girls, well, actually they were all youth, and he went ahead and tried them as adults. So it's obviously something happened. I've never seen, I mean, everybody's against crime and people talk about what they're going to do, but I've never seen this kind of merger of a really loyal Republican and an outspoken Democrat.
And so, I mean, what are we to make of that, Jeremy? What do you think in terms of politics?
I mean, there's nothing but politics on this thing. I mean, ever since Jason Williams got elected, he's been moving stuff off of his desk, and now he's got this off of his desk too. But, I mean, it's not that big of a give. I mean, he's letting the state police, he's letting the state prosecute state-related arrests that happen in New Orleans. Well, you know, that's not that huge of a deal. To me, that sounds like an opening salvo. Big question is what's next, and you can look at this I think there are folks in New Orleans who look at this as either the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning, because New Orleans has always had this long-held autonomy from the state, where there's a special section in the Constitution or a special treatment at the state capitol. New Orleans has always got that preferential treatment, and now the state's creeping in and starting to take a little bit here and a little bit there. And the real question is, where does it end? What else is coming? What does it look like? And I do think it's valid. I do think there's probably more coming.
Well, a big thing was in '54 when New Orleans and the state agreed to adopt the Home Rule Charter. And that changed it, because back then, the state used to almost have absolute control over the city. And so the city was guaranteed more of its own control. But this is finally, giving in a little bit on the police thing. But the other thing you're seeing, that so-called progressive district attorney movement, which is around the country. And you've seen a lot of backlash on that. You've seen people who were, the law is different in some places. In Florida, a governor can remove a district attorney, and we saw an example of that. We saw, where was it, I think in San Francisco, that they voted one out, And
a lot of it is on the prosecution side. Some
Yeah.
of it is due to money, and that's exactly what part of this
Yeah.
was. Now it was about it.
Even Williams had to walk back some of his stuff because he vowed he was not going to prosecute juveniles as adults, by and large. But he's not just this case last week, but several cases since he took office. He's changed his mind
And
on
since
that.
he got carjacked.
Right.
And since he got carjacked
And I
himself.
think those two are going to be prosecuted as adults too. So we'll see, how this, actually it seems to be good news for the city of New Orleans with these combined efforts to fight crime in the city. That's what everybody wants, is public safety, a safe city.
And we're still there at the shortage of police positions,
Yeah.
but at least Landry up front is committed to them. I don't think it's going to be a surprise that one day they get a call from the governor and say, hey, look, we need to go to New Orleans. I think people going into the state police, and including the new police chief, going to know that part of what they got to do
Right.
is go fight crime in New Orleans.
Right, exactly. Okay, so we're talking also now, while we're on the politics vein, about Democrats in the state. And, we have Democrats certainly in the city of New Orleans. It's sort of a bastion of Democrats. But around the state, we're just really seeing a weakening.
Yeah, look, if you're in Baton Rouge, Shreveport, New Orleans, it may not seem this way if you're looking around locally, but Democrats have never been weaker statewide, and it's well documented. It's been in newspapers, it's been on broadcasts, it's been on radio. Fewer Democrats are registering to vote in Louisiana than ever before. More Republicans are registering to vote than ever before. We have lost, Democrats have lost statewide office. There are no Democrats remaining in statewide office. So the big question is what's next? And so 2024 is going to be kind of a mile marker year for Louisiana Democrats. There are two big things happening. One is redistricting. If you haven't kept up with this, redistricting happens every 10 years as a decennial task at the legislature where they have to draw lines for election districts. And the congressional map, just based on nothing else but math alone, needs to include a second black majority district, which it does not have right now. When that happens, Democrats will suddenly have double the representation in the U.S. House from Louisiana. So that's important for Democrats to make sure that happens. The judge, the Fifth Circuit has given the legislature additional time to finish this task. The date of that deadline is January 30th. Inauguration is January 8th. Washington Mardi Gras is January 27th. Lawmakers are already saying they may not be able to hit that deadline. We'll have to see, but that's incredibly important to Democrats. The second thing is internal leadership elections. Katie Bernhard was elected two state party cycles ago. She was reelected, I believe, last year or recently, and she's going to have to run for reelection again in 2024. And Democrats, the state central committee is going to have to decide if they want to stick with that leadership or go in a different direction. And she'll also have to decide if she wants to run for reelection. But after an election cycle where few marketable Democrats were recruited for important races, and where she herself actually seemed like she was flirting with the governor's race personally for a little while, there are a lot of questions about what happens next for the Democratic Party and for her leadership.
What about Democratic power in the legislature?
It's the numbers are weaker than they have ever been. The big question exactly is going to be what kind of role can Democrats play? Because, it used to be in the prior two terms of state government that Democrats had at least enough numbers to be a swing vote or to influence certain things if they would make some smart alliances. Those numbers aren't as strong as they used to be. The delegations and caucuses are going to be different now, so we're going to have to wait and see exactly what kind of role they can play, what kind of impact. Right now, when you look at the elections for House Speaker and Senate President that are coming up in early January, Democrats have played little to no role in those conversations.
Interesting.
The traditional Democratic base of minorities and labor, and I guess white college-aged liberals or so, that's been the base. Do you think that's weakening?
You know, I think it is. I think that donors and special interests like to go where the winners are, and that's Republicans right now in statewide politics. That's why you've seen Jeff Landry make inroads with groups like the Trial Bar. That's a group that traditionally goes with Democrats, but they will go with a Republican like they did with Jeff Landry and like they did with Bobby Jindal. And that's why I think that this first couple of years of Jeff Landry's term in office are going to somewhat resemble what we saw with Bobby Jindal's first couple of years.
All right, thanks a lot, Jeremy. And Drew, let's go on over to you right now because we talk about Orleans and the Democrats. Jefferson Parish, a pretty heavily Republican parish. You wrote recently about the demographics in Jefferson Parish and what the population is looking like. What are leaders facing and what do they hope to do regarding the population in Jefferson Parish? Who do they want to bring in?
Well, what they want to do and hope to do is to bring in young, white-collar, professional adults, preferably ones who are raising children and all. And that hadn't been happening for 30 or 40 years. You know, when the oil crisis hit in the mid-'80s, that was kind of the end of the population peak for Jefferson. But it was also the point at which young people quit moving in, by and large. So now we're to the point where the population over age 60 is equal to that younger than 18, and it's just going to keep heading in that direction. To be able to attract those people, you can't just go out and say, hey, come move to Jefferson Parish. You've got to give them something, whether it's fun entertainment options, fun dining options, fun housing options, or, in Jefferson's case, good jobs. Jefferson's got a pretty stable economy, but not the kind that's going to attract new people, a tech industry or whatever. And that's the big puzzle that they have to figure out.
Part of it that Jefferson Parish is running out of space. Like back in the 80s, I mean, there were all these subdivisions you can build, and now there's not space.
Exactly it. The East Bank is just almost entirely built out. There's some room on the West Bank, but it's fairly wet. So any brand new developments is going to have to be, you're going to have to tear stuff down and build it from scratch. There's just not any vacant land of any importance to be able to build on over there. I think we were talking earlier about at Clearview Mall, they're building a very large apartment complex right behind it that's kind of reinventing that entire mall property, not only the retail area too, but Oshner came in and took over the Sears site, so they're trying to sort of make over an old retail site into something new and exciting. That place will open in January, and we'll begin to see if any of that pans out and they gain any.
So where are these people moving then if they're not going to Jefferson Parish and if they don't want to live in the city?
Well, since the 80s, particularly in the 90s, people go to St. Tammany. Younger people, families who could afford it and didn't mind the drive, they'd move to St. Tammany. You can get even more land there than you could in Jefferson and bigger houses. Since Katrina, it's been my observation that people are moving back into New Orleans. There's been a little bit sort of the hip neighborhoods and I've been here for 30 or 40 years, and the Bywater was not a big attractive area until after Katrina, and now suddenly it's a lot of people want to move there.
Bernard is coming back too.
It's just filtered down into Araby also. So I think since Katrina, there's been a resurgence of interest among young people in going to New Orleans. Prior to that, it was St. Tammany. Whether Jefferson can regain some of that, I don't know.
Well, is Jefferson Parish the most populous parish still in the state, or
Second.
is it two?
Second behind East Baton Rouge.
Baton Rouge right now. It's just that the population is aging.
It's aging. Yeah, the population is it's plateaued around 1990. It stayed like a little bit below 450,000, but it's aging. So there's a lot of older people, very few younger people moving. Still has the biggest public school system in the state, but that's saying 43,000 students, whereas in the peak it was 71,000.
Yeah, so
that's
it
really dropped off a lot.
It was shrinking too, and of course they had to consolidate or close schools.
Closing
recently.
Schools, and they're going to sell off 6 campuses. Now, that's the school board's doing that. Interestingly, the parish has the same issue with its playgrounds. It's got 27 playgrounds. Many of them underused. They're not going to sell off any of them. They're just trying to reimagine what can we do with them to make use of them as public properties, maybe to market them more to older people. Maybe it's going to be the pickleball place instead of the youth football place.
And the housing stock. The aging population is wanting to stay in their homes and not turn them over perhaps to younger folks?
There's a lot of that. I found that out in reporting in West Metairie in the Delta Playground area, where it's a very, very aged population there. But they're saying they're people who've lived there forever. They don't want to move out. If they may sell to their children, and then their children take over that place. So there's not a lot of turnover in some areas. University City in Kenner, that's one area that's turned over a lot, and it's sort of on its third cycle of young people moving in. But that's really an isolated exception to most of this.
Mr. Jefferson Parish is earning its revenue primarily from sales, retail sales, good shopping there.
Huge retail juggernaut for the entire area. It's got some very large industry that, as they come off the property tax exemptions, will be pumping a lot of money into it. But they're very fortunate that it's a big retail magnet for the entire New Orleans area, as we saw, like after Katrina and after Ida. People needed to be rebuilt. A lot of the Jefferson stores were already open.
I remember, I guess it was about a year after Katrina, talking to Ed Muniz, who was the mayor of Kenner at the time. And he says, the population in Kenner is the same as it was before Katrina, but it's a different population. It's different people now. Okay, that the people who live, the Chateau Estates crowd had moved out, is going to be more of a Hispanic population, but he says it's a different population.
The numbers were the same, but the mix was different.
And
right.
it is a diverse population in Jefferson Parish, too.
It is. Kenner especially, that's a good point. Kenner has probably 20% Hispanic American population, and that's gone up, every decennial census since I've been there, too. You talk about Jefferson as a big Republican stronghold, too. That's still the case, but not like it was in the 70s and 80s. I mean, Jefferson went for John Bel Edwards in 2015 and in 2019. And in 2015, it was with David Vitter, who was a hometown product.
And we should acknowledge there's the whole West Bank and the lower West Bank and all that.
Right,
There's
it's
probably
not
not
all
too
East
much
Bank,
turnover there, but it's still Port Jefferson Parish.
Exactly.
Just sort of
That's
wrap
a whole
this up.
other world.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a Jeffersonian. I grew up there and I wound up back there, and it's a very comfortable place to live. And I got it just anecdotally, just in my neighborhood, I am seeing younger folks, jogging and riding their bikes and pushing their strollers, and that's really good to see. Thanks a lot, Drew. All right, over to you, Dawn. Hotels, boy, we just keep seeing them.
We keep seeing them, and actually they're doing better. Not still, our highest year within the last 5 in terms of occupancy still stands out as 2018. 2018 hotel occupancy, when we're talking about greater New Orleans area right now, hit 75.2% occupancy for the total of 2018. It dipped just a teeny bit in 2019, but in 2020, during the height of COVID, the hotel occupancy for the year ended at just over 36%. And we're still just creeping up from that. 2022, which started off with COVID restrictions still, it doesn't feel like it was that recent. It was. 2022 ended at 60.4%. And we're looking at maybe 64% to end 2023. So creeping upwards. And the tourism folks say with so much on the books coming in, things should be progressively getting better. The International Workboat Show is here now. Good Housekeeping has named the city a must-see. Good Housekeeping Institute has named us a must-see city for 2024. Jazz Fest is going to have 8 days, and I think the Rolling Stones Extra Day has already sold out, I believe. Essence is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, or next year in New Orleans. Taylor Swift's coming in October, and all of that is leading up to Super Bowl. So there are big events that are coming, and it looks like everybody is either planning to build or renovate to get ready for that. In terms of renovations, the Windsor Court is doing a $3 million renovation on its pool area. The Restaurant Revolution and Royal Sonesta has $1.5 million in renovations permitted. The Caesars Hotel is being rebranded from the Harrah's. It's a $435 million renovation to that 450 hotel room property. And then there are some new fun ones coming along. Big Frida is opening a small boutique hotel at Decatur and Frenchman Street. It's a nightclub and a 5-room hotel. Coppervine Restaurant or Wine Pub on Poydras is opening their inn, which is 11 rooms. So some different kind of hotels for our area. And then there are new hotels slated both next to the Columns Hotel on St. Charles Avenue and at 757 St. Charles Avenue. And we've seen an increase, not just in tourism, but an increase in level of brands, seeing the Four Seasons come to town and those sorts of things.
Right.
So not only is it improving in terms of the renovations, but the stock of those hotels and what's available to tourists is getting better. And the tourism folks remind us all, here's their quote, not mine, that tourism is economic development, that it boosts infrastructure, instills civic pride, and provides lifelong career opportunities. And things that make it good for people to visit here also make it a good place to live and work and invest. Speaking of work, the return of the workforce has made it challenging also for these hotels,
Right.
not just to get people back, but to train them. There was so much lost in customer service training during the pandemic that just isn't back yet in terms of getting that great service. You know,
Yeah.
hello, Marcia, how are you today?
Right.
Have you enjoyed your stay in New Orleans? That needs to come back, and that's not quite back yet. They're working on it.
But the tourists are coming back and they need a place to stay. So it sounds like we have a
And
place
with the
to offer
Airbnb
to
rules,
them.
what they are in the city, they'll be staying in hotels for now.
Yeah, okay, very good. All right, Don, thanks a lot. Okay, Jeremy, let's go on over to you, wrap up with you. And always on politics, because you know your politics. Rising political stars. We wanted to talk about that, you know, after the series of elections that we recently had. Who really comes out front to you?
I mean, we could talk regional, local, statewide politics, but I'm going to focus on the legislature. I think the legislature has always been sort of a forum league for statewide politics. And, you know, the big names are those who hold the big gavels. The next speaker is probably going to be Cameron Henry from Jefferson Parish. The next Senate president is going to be Cameron Henry from Jefferson Parish. And the next House speaker is probably going to be Philip de Villiers of Eunice, who we discussed on this show. But there are also these kind of lower ranking positions that are going to become more important. And I think that we're going to start seeing these names in the news a lot. And folks may not know them. And I'm going to start with the majority leaders in Boats Chamber. That's a title that we don't hear a lot in Louisiana, but you're going to start hearing more. And it's interchangeable with the Republican delegation chairs. And on the House side, it looks like Representative Mark Wright is in a good position to make a strong bid early next week during the House GOP internal elections. He is currently the House Transportation Chair. He is from St. Tammany Parish, and he is completing his first term. And you're going to hear that a lot from me in this quick talk. There are a lot of folks who are new, who are not third termers, final termers, who are moving into these leadership positions. On the Senate side, it looks like a senator named Jeremy Stein is going to make a strong bid for Senate Majority Leader. He is from Lake Charles. His family owns a number of retail businesses called Stein Lumber. It's basically like a localized Home Depot. He's the spokesperson. He's always on TV. He's on social media. But he would be a strong kind of spokesperson for the Senate Republican delegation, who's always kind of been overshadowed a little bit by the House and all the drama that's there. Finally, I'm going to point to a New Orleans local who is Matthew Willard, another individual who's finishing up his first term. He was just elected this week as the new chairman of the House Democratic Caucus. You know, for the last 4 years, there have been a lot of eyes on Matt Willard and his ability to forge alliances, to move legislation. He takes his job very seriously at the Capitol. He reads the legislation. He puts in the work. And so there have been expectations that he could step up and become a real leader, and then now he's got a shot.
Jeremy, let me suggest another name, Liz Muriel, the new Attorney General.
Absolutely, that was one of the
Very
biggest,
impressive campaign, a protege of Jeff Landry, a woman at the time of health. I mean, she seems like and she already has a statewide office.
Yeah, and and actually we're going to have two women in statewide office with Secretary of State Nancy Landry and Liz Muriel in the Attorney General's office, and that's something we haven't seen a lot. And I'm almost positive that we also have a record number of women who were elected to the Louisiana legislature this year as well. So after several cycles of these big promises that women would do well on the ballot, we saw a cycle where there wasn't that focus, and it ended up being that way anyway.
Yeah, it certainly was.
And especially if Muriel can be positioned as a crime fighter now with the new responsibilities, it's all the more,
Sure. I mean, it looks like she's going to play a very important role in the Landry administration.
So special sessions, what we have heard about, maybe one for
Well,
insurance.
where do I start? So we're going to have an organizational session January 8th to elect the new speaker and Senate president and to swear members in. There's supposed to be a special session on redistricting to redraw the maps sometime right after, maybe, if it doesn't run into Washington Mardi Gras. Jeff Landry wanted to call a special session on crime before the regular session, which is in the spring, and then there's the regular session, which I believe is in March. There was talk about a special session on insurance that the insurance commissioner-elect wanted to call and that Jeff Landry seemed open to. And not to be outdone, in Louisiana, if you want to pass taxes, you have to do it in an odd-numbered year. Jeff Landry's first year as governor, where he's coming in with this momentum and lawmakers are coming in with all these Republicans, if they want to do anything on taxes while they've got this momentum, they're going to have to call a special session. That or wait until 2025. So it's going to be busy.
It's going to be busy, definitely is. All right, Jeremy, thanks a lot. Okay, other stories. E, over to you.
Well, for a long time, people have been saying, let's do something with Lincoln Beach. Lincoln Beach used to be the amusement park back in the days of segregation. It was closed in '64. There have been many starts, but never finished. The Cantrell administration announced this week a master plan, which is it's being funded by a millage which passed, $24.6 million to develop Lincoln Beach. So for the first time, it seems like there's a real effort, there's real momentum in terms of developing the site.
Okay, we're looking forward to it. Thanks. Drew.
One thing that kind of interests me, and it's sort of a policy issue, is 20 years ago we started exempting people 65 and older from increasing their assessed value of their property.
Right.
It was frozen if they met certain income requirements. Since then, we've added several more. There's one for disabled veterans. This past election, we exempted first responders if they met certain conditions. One thing I'm kind of interested in looking into is how much money is being given up there. It benefits these people, but somewhere somebody's not getting any money at all just by the repeated exemptions we had.
All righty, thanks a lot. Don.
Big day on Tulane's campus tomorrow as they play for the AAC championship. And it would be history in the making if they win it a second time and put them potentially in a New Year's Day bowl game. So
All right.
big news in New Orleans for a
Yes,
change.
indeed. Go Green Wave. All right, over to you, Jeremy.
Just when voters thought they were done, we're pulling them back in. 2 more elections this calendar year, December 16th. Every vote matters category, 2 tie votes in Cameron Parish and Opelousas. So they happen. It's rare, but when that happens, they have to be recalled. They're being held again December 16th.
Interesting. I didn't realize that happened.
election.
2 tie votes. Amazing. All right, guys. Great conversation. Thanks so much for being here. And thank you all for joining us, too. We will see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.